Good day to you all. My name is Nick, and welcome to Homicide Harbor, where we delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche. Today, we unlock the chilling story of one of history's most notorious serial killers, Andrei Chikatilo. Brace yourself as we reveal the unfathomable journey that led this seemingly ordinary man to become an absolute monster. Before we begin, if you are interested in deciphering the psychological aspects that drive serial killers to commit horrific crimes, please leave a like and subscribe to our videos so we can notify you of future videos. Now, let's set sail. Chikatilo's rampage spread across multiple regions, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. Over the years, he claimed the lives of at least 53 women, children, and teenagers, marking him as one of the deadliest serial killers in history. But what drove this seemingly ordinary man to commit such heinous acts? Nobody knows for sure, but let's dive into the world of Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Chikatilo was born on the 16th of October 1936. At this point in time, the USSR as a whole was suffering from famine, and remote areas such as his village were affected deeply. In some later interviews, Chikatilo stated that he hadn't tasted bread until the age of 12, and his family often had to feed on whatever they could find, in some cases resorting to leaves, grass, or even everyday items such as leather belts. Chikatilo's childhood was not free of dark and sinister stories, one coming directly from his parents. According to them, he once had a brother whose name was Stepan, whom he never met. His brother, Stepan, disappeared at the age of 4 and was rumored to have been kidnapped, murdered, and consumed by one of the neighboring families, trying to survive. Although not proven documentally, such cases had become unfortunately very common among all regions of the USSR. Due to the lack of quality social services at the time, Stepan's existence was never documented. No remains or traces of Stepan were ever found. As World War II broke out, Chikatilo's father was drafted into the army. Chikatilo's life became an endless search for shelter among the rubble, ditches, and cellars his mother could find for them. In one instance, possibly witnessing the sexual abuse of his mother by a German soldier who had located her hideout, which later led to the birth of his younger sister Tatiana. As a result of the stress from his tumultuous early childhood, Chikatilo often wet the bed at night and was harshly scolded by his mother, who ridiculed him for his condition. In interviews prior to his trial, he described his childhood in just 4 words: hunger, ridicule, and absolute poverty. During his adolescence, Chikatilo was surprisingly an excellent student and excelled academically despite his poor vision, which resulted in him wearing very thick glasses. However, this distinction made him easy prey for bullies who often harassed him for his looks and weak stature. Aside from the constant bullying, he also found out he was impotent while attempting to socialize with the opposite gender. This led to all of his relationships failing miserably and fueled his self-hatred and anger at the world further. The first red flag and documented deviant behavior was when at the age of 17 he physically assaulted an 11-year-old girl and managed to wrestle her to the ground. He admitted later that overpowering her produced him pleasure. This was the first red flag, but only one of the many that lay ahead. After finishing college, Chikatilo was drafted into the army, where he served his country without further incidents. However, as he returned to society and tried to build a relationship with a young divorcee from his village, the young couple broke up after multiple attempts to have sexual intercourse, which led to rumors about his impotence spreading. Chikatilo claimed he would see girls and boys talk behind his back and humiliate him for his condition. He tried at this time to end his own life, but his mother and neighbors saved him, not knowing what the future held. Life in his village quickly became unbearable, and he decided to move to Rostov, where, thanks to his younger sister Tatiana, he met his future wife Feodosia, with whom he had 2 children. He focused on finishing university, and upon graduating, he took a teaching job at a boarding school in Novoshakhtinsk. There too, students mocked him for his appearance and paid little to no attention in his classes. He was a very knowledgeable teacher, but simply could not maintain any discipline in his classes. In order to satisfy his sexual needs at the time, his colleagues reported that he would spy on teens sleeping in their dormitories during his surveillance duties, in hopes of catching them undressed. In May 1973, he repeated the exact same assault as he had done at the age of 17. He swam towards a young pupil of the school and proceeded to sexually assault her. Months later, he also locked another student in a classroom and proceeded to assault her too. Surprisingly, no disciplinary actions were taken at the time, and Chikatilo was only asked to resign after the letters of complaints piled on the school director's desk. As crazy as it may seem, another school gave him employment. But after seeing similar behavioral patterns, Chikatilo's teaching career was finally terminated due to the exponential growth in complaints of sexual assault. In 1978, tragedy struck, and Chikatilo committed his first documented murder of Yelena Zakotnova, a 9-year-old girl. He lured Zakotnova to an old hut he had secretly purchased and attempted to assault her, but failed. After attempting to stab her, he choked her unconscious and threw her body into the Grushevka River. Despite numerous evidence linking Chikatilo to Zakotnova's murder, a 25-year-old laborer, Alexander Kravchenko, was arrested for the crime and erroneously executed by firing squad, despite having a strong alibi, multiple appeals, and retrials. Chikatilo later claimed that the urge to relive the macabre experience had overwhelmed him. Chikatilo was known for the brutality he displayed in his murders, with many victims displaying evidence of mutilation to their eye sockets and reproductive systems. Pathologists concluded that these injuries were caused by a knife. In later murders, he even resorted to cannibalism and consumed regions of his victim's flesh. In his confession interviews, he explained that the mutilation to the eyes were due to a popular Russian superstition that the image of the murderer was imprinted on the eyes of his victims. He later realized this was just an old wives' tale and stopped the procedure. Psychiatrists also believed the mutilations to the reproductive system were clear displays of anger towards his own inability to have sexual intercourse. He projected this self-hatred onto his victims and wanted to put them in his own shoes post-mortem. The cannibalistic aspect of his murders can be linked to the disappearance of his brother Stepan. Until very old age, Chikatilo truly believed his brother had been consumed and therefore proceeded to do so himself with some of his victims. After his second arrest in August 1991, Chikatilo was transferred to the Serbsky Institute in Moscow for a 60-day psychiatric evaluation. Senior psychiatrist Andrei Tkachenko analyzed his physiological problems, attributed to prenatal brain damage. Tkachenko observed a gradual descent into perversion, compounded by biological and environmental factors. Chikatilo's extreme acts of homicidal violence were committed to relieve internal tension. Tkachenko concluded that despite suffering from a borderline personality disorder with sadistic features, he was fit for trial. Now, about borderline personality disorder. It is a mental health disorder that impacts the way people think and feel about themselves and others, causing problems to functioning in everyday life. It includes self-image issues, difficulty managing emotions and behavior, and a pattern of unstable relationships. With borderline personality disorder, individuals experience an intense fear of abandonment or instability, and may have difficulty tolerating being alone. Yet inappropriate anger, impulsiveness, and frequent mood swings may push others away, despite the desire to have loving and lasting relationships. Borderline personality disorder usually begins by early adulthood. The condition seems to be worse in young adulthood, and may gradually get better with age. In Chikatilo's case, however, this personality disorder grew increasingly worse due to his inability to maintain any type of sexual intercourse, expanding his feeling of loneliness and directing it into his sadistic thoughts. In his mind, he believed that this macabre way of maintaining a relationship was the only way somebody was willing to deal with him. Finally, in February 1994, the reign of terror finally came to an end, and Chikatilo was apprehended and brought to justice. His trial captivated the world, revealing the depths of his depravity and sparking a global debate on the nature of evil. Chikatilo's trial was the first major media event in post-Soviet Russia. After his psychiatric evaluation, investigators released a full list of Chikatilo's crimes to the press, along with a 1984 identification of the accused. The Russian press regularly published exaggerated and sensationalistic headlines about the murders, referring to Chikatilo as a cannibal or a maniac, and his physically resembling to a shaven-skulled, demonic individual. On August 9th, the defense presented their closing arguments against Chikatilo, arguing that he had no confidence in the judge's objectivity and that crimes of this nature could have not been committed by an individual with a sane mind. The prosecutor argued that Chikatilo fully understood the criminality of his actions, was able to resist his homicidal impulses, and had made numerous conscious efforts to avoid detention. The prosecutor recited each of the charges before formally requesting the death penalty. After the prosecutor's argument, Chikatilo sat mute and was scheduled to be sentenced on the 15th of September. The court reconvened to hear formal sentencing on October the 14th, and the judge announced Chikatilo guilty of 52 of the 53 murders for which he had been tried. He was sentenced to death for each offense and was also found guilty of 5 counts of sexual assault committed during his time as a teacher in the 1970s. The judge stated that the court had no alternative but to impose the only sentence he deserves. Chikatilo was taken to his cell at Novotcherkassk prison to await execution. He lodged an appeal against this conviction with the Supreme Court of Russia, but was rejected. After filing a final appeal for his clemency with President Boris Yeltsin, it was rejected. Chikatilo was finally executed with a single gunshot behind the right ear on February 14, 1994. Even though it has been more than 20 years since his execution, his name still strikes fear into the minds of all residents of ex-USSR countries, to the point where going to train stations or forests at night is to this day considered extremely dangerous and to be avoided at all times. As with many cases, the red flags were clear early on, and many of the victims' deaths could have been prevented. But the system not only failed the victims, but also Andrei Chikatilo as a person who clearly struggled psychologically from a very early age. This was the tale of Andrei Chikatilo. As always, thank you for watching. I hope to see you all next time, as we take a deep dive into other cases that history cannot erase nor forget. Until then, keep your eyes open and senses sharp. My name is Nick, and this is Homicide Harbor.